Prepare, respond, survive. When seconds count, train with the best. Fire facilities, custom steel towers built for real-world fire training. Be ready, be resilient.
Welcome, everybody. This is Eric Dreiman coming to you with the October episode of the Hooks and Hoses podcast. I want to welcome everybody back. The months just keep ticking along. It's hard to believe we're, by the time this video or this podcast comes out, it'll almost be Halloween. So it's getting into the fall season, and there's a lot going on. But our guest today is Assistant Chief of Training, Rob Grady from the Gary Fire Department. Welcome, Chief.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm glad we could make this work. Chief, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how your family history in the fire service and how you got started in it and how you ended up at Gary and your road along the way?
So in 1990, when I graduated from high school, in June of 90, I started the fire service in October of 1990. My father was a volunteer firefighter, paid on call in a small town in northwest Indiana, right on the Indiana-Illinois border, a town of Munster. As a child, my dad used to take us to the firehouse. I wouldn't say my brothers; they were real interested in the fire service, but for whatever reason, I was. My dad would take us to the firehouse. He'd work on the fire trucks. He pump tested the fire trucks. He was very, very active in the fire service. He started actually a day after I was born, in July of 1972. So July 6th, I believe, he started the fire service. So when we were little, like I said, he would take us to the firehouse, and I just thought it was just the coolest thing ever, because you get to, jump up and down on the fire trucks and look at all the equipment they had. And I remember the town of Munster had a Aaron's Fox fire truck, and it had that wind up siren on it. So I would grab that siren and I would wind it, and my dad would be like, "Knock it off! You're killing my eardrums." So I just thought that was the coolest thing ever, to be able to hang out at the firehouse with my dad. And then in the later 90s, I moved to Pennsylvania. I was, you're young, you fall in love with a girl and everything. So you follow the girl and you move to Pennsylvania and, lived there, was married, had a young daughter had a young daughter at the time. And then, I drove past a firehouse that was close to where I lived, and I stopped in and I started talking to the guys there. And I remember the chief being there. I still in contact with him today. His name was Mark Pearson, real good guy. I asked him if they were looking for any volunteers and stuff, and he said, yeah, we are. And so I filled out a little application, and then went down and got on the fire department there. And so then I went to the first time I ever formally went to a fire academy was in the North Hills of Pennsylvania. And when I went there, it was really cool, man. They had a training tower, burn building, formal classrooms and stuff, and a lot of good guys that I met along the way when I was there. One guy that really sticks out to me was Jim Petruzzi from Truck 8. In Pittsburgh. He was one of our instructors. Another one that was one of our instructors, she was part of the St. Valentine's line of duty death. Patricia Conroy. She was one of my instructors in the fire academy. So when that incident happened in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, she was actually one of the instructors that I had in the fire academy. So I remember I remember that like it was yesterday. So then after a while, my wife and I at the time split up, and I moved back to Indiana. But between between that, I was traveling. I would go to the city of Gary and ride on the fire trucks in the city of Gary. I'd met some firemen there, and they said they had a ride along program. But the guy that got me started riding, which the guy him is Kevin Novacek. He was riding in the city of Gary, where you were allowed to ride on the fire trucks and and fight fire. And it was like, really, and they're like, yeah, you can come and ride with us, fight fire, everything. So it was like, man, where can you go and get that type of training? I mean, today would be almost impossible, but back then I was, I signed a waiver, went and rode on the heavy rescue squad there, and everybody said, man, the city of Gary, those guys they get a lot of fires. Those guys do a lot of work, and I'll never forget the first time I ever rode. We didn't turn a wheel, nothing. Didn't have ate real good, ate great, didn't turn a wheel. But I can tell you, first day I walked into a firehouse in the city of Gary, those guys, I mean, they welcomed you in open arms. I mean, they were just some of the greatest guys you're ever going to meet in your life. And a lot of them are obviously retired now. Some of them are some of the guys are dead. But just walking in first time walking in the number one firehouse in the city of Gary, just how the guys treated you. They were just like, they didn't care you were a volunteer firefighter. They didn't care where you were from. They just looked at you as you're a firefighter, and that was it. And I thought that was I really made you feel good that they treated you like you were one of them. So it was good. So like I said, the first time I rode, didn't turn a wheel, didn't go anywhere. And then my second time I went and rode. We ended up with 4 working house fires, and I was like, I was just amazed. I couldn't believe, how big. Like I said, 4 working fires in a 24-hour shift, and these guys, I mean, they were just, unbelievable what these guys could do on the fire ground. And I was like, I think this is where I want to be. Was just by the way the guys treated you, just by watching them, what they did, how they fought fire. I'm like, I think I want to do this. This is what I want to do. So I continued to ride. I was, like I said, I had moved back to Indiana. I was working for the town of Munster in Public Works, and it's funny because a lot of people when you're sitting in an academy class, you ask people, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Who wants to be a career firefighter here in class? And, you see a bunch of hands raised, or, and then you get a couple guys say, hey, I want to be a police officer. And it's like, oh, okay. And then, so then I told people, I said, well, I started off as a sanitation engineer. I was a garbage man. They're like, what? I said, I was a garbage man. I threw garbage, and I did. I was a garbage man. And so I did that. And what's crazy is I would be on not like the garbage men of today. They got these fancy lifts and all this stuff. Yeah. It was pure strength. Just lifting up. Obviously we didn't have all this technology we have today. So I would do that all day, and then I would actually leave and grab my bunker gear and stuff, and I'd put in my car, and I'd go to the city of Gary and ride at night. So yeah. I would ride the black shift, which is the second turn for the on the city of Gary. So I would ride on the second shift during the week, and then on the weekend I would ride all weekend. I'd ride Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. All 24-hour shifts. So after a while, I was like the fly on the wall, and then I got to know everybody on the fire department, from the chief all the way down. And I get, and again, the guys they were great. You were actually learning the fire. You were learning how to be a firefighter, and they were teaching you how to be a firefighter, and you didn't even know it half the time because you were just having a lot of fun. And and at that time I was I was in my early 20s, so I'd been riding. I was 18, and then I was in my early 20s, and I was riding all the time. And then the city. So the city had a hiring process. So I put in to get hired on the job, and I got hired in 1999. So I started my career in January of 1999. I started my career fire service with the City of Gary Fire Department. And then it was so then you get hired, you go through the fire academy, and they didn't care that you already had you had your fire 1, fire 2. They didn't care, and they were putting you through their process, which in my eyes I think it's a great thing, because you're going through the academy again, and what you think you knew, you didn't. You truly didn't. You thought, well, I know everything already. I don't know why I got to go through this again. But I wasn't the only person that was that had fire 1 and 2. There were several other firefighters in the class that had it. And like I said, the fire department put you through the academy, all over again. So we went through the fire academy. So as we were going through the fire academy, the fire academy was at an old firehouse, Station 6. They used to call it the dollhouse, and really interesting firehouse, because it was obviously the door was a lower door, and at the time the rig that they had that was running out of there, they had to put smaller tires on it so they could fit in the firehouse. And so it actually had they used to call low riding 6. So so in the firehouse, it was training, and then upstairs was the classroom, and in the main area of the classroom, along the walls were little bedrooms, and that's how the firehouse was set up. So all along the walls were bedrooms, and then what the training division did was they made them. So we spent our time there, and then like I said, we went through the fire academy, and it was very interesting, because you and I we do a lot of live fire together, and I remember when we were doing our live fire training, and obviously it was totally different than it is today, and but it was some of the best experiences ever. And at times you said to yourself, man, I don't think we're going to make it today, but it was good. It was do what you're told. Open your eyes, open your ears, and keep your mouth shut, and listen to what these guys had to tell you. So, but after the academy, so after the fire academy, when they give you your assignments, I got assigned all the way to the west side of the city to an engine company 9. So I went to engine company 9 all the way on the far west side, and at first I was kind of like, man, I want to be in Midtown. I want to be in Midtown, because in Midtown those companies are busy. Well, I didn't realize at the time how busy Engine 9 was, and Engine 9 was busy. They were a busy company, and because it ran the whole west side of the city, and then it would move east when on extra alarms and stuff. So I didn't pay attention. I wasn't paying attention to that company, because I was always riding on the squad, and I knew the squad went to every fire in the city. And of course that would be your goal. My goal was to go to the squad, but I knew I wasn't going there as a rookie, because I didn't put rookies on the squad.
Right.
So I was at Engine 9. I knew my first captain. Well. His name was Calvin Bankhead, great guy. Just seen him the other day. He was at my office the other day. Stopped in, see how things were going. He's super nice guy. Just great. I remember the first conversation we had when I got assigned. We sat down in the kitchen, and I knew my engineer already because the engineer that I had on Engine 9, he had worked at Station 1 as a firefighter, so I used to see him all the time. And then my senior private, my senior private, his name was Robert Miller. He was real low key guy. I wouldn't, he's a real nice guy, just real low key. Kind of kept to himself a lot, but still see him today. Super nice guy. But I'll never forget my captain sitting us down, and he's talking, and he says, he goes, "Hey, you already know what to do. You've been around. You know what needs to be taken care of. I think that's the only conversation we need to have." And I said, "Okay." So I knew that obviously you got housework to do. You got to write. You got the log. You got to keep the log, every run that's going on in the city. And then if something needs to be taken care of, take care of it. And I'm like, okay. So, my time at Station 9 was interesting because my captain had actually gone off, and he actually hurt his back. And at that time, we had just my senior private got in. He got promoted to engineer, and then there's another class that came in behind us. 6 months after we got out of the academy, there was another academy going on, and they sent they sent another rookie to Station 9. So now we got me, my captain, my engineer, and another guy out of the academy. And my captain had gone off. He hurt his back at a call, and he went off sick. So one day my battalion chief came up, and he says, he had asked me, he says, hey Grady, can I talk to you? Because a lot of people they when they ask you, "Hey Grady, what's your last name?" And I said Grady. They said, "Well, what's your first name?" A lot of people, a lot of people think my first name's Grady, and it's not. But I just go Grady's. I always tell people Grady's good with me. I'm good. So he came up to me and he says, "Hey, your captain's off sick." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, they cut out overtime." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, they cut out overtime. The division chief wants you to ride the seat on the engine." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, he wants you to ride the seat on. You're going to be the acting officer on the engine." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I'm thinking to myself, "Well, what about Kevin? Because Kevin's the senior guy here, and usually the engineer moves up, and then the senior firefighter's driving." And he's like, "No." Kevin said no. He said, "You can handle it." He goes, "You can ride the seat. You can handle it." And I was like, "Okay." So now here I am, and it's me and a new guy, and obviously a guy with 20 years on the job, and I'm in charge of the company. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm nervous. I wouldn't tell anybody I was nervous. So now I'm riding the seat. And I say this to a lot of these young kids today is you'll be riding that seat faster than you think, Mm-hmm. So I was riding the seat, and we were catching fires, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna do the best job I can. That's all I can do. That's all anybody can ever ask, to do the best job you can. So we were getting fires, and it was funny because we were catching quite a bit of work on the west side, and we had a fire one day, and it was a good fire on a good second floor fire, and we stretched it up to the second floor, and we hammered it, and I got it. Of course, you grow up and you say, all right. So I tell the bat chief, I said, "Hey chief, we got a good hit on the fire. You can hold the squad." And so I said, he could hold the squad, and then I heard him call on the radio to hold the squad, and I just kind of chuckled to myself because I'm like, you know what, it was funny because I used to hear people say it all the time, but to say it yourself, it was like I said, I was just laughing, and so we get back to the firehouse, and it was probably about an hour after we got back to the firehouse, the phone rang, and so then. This guy, we were both rookies, so I wouldn't say he was my private because he wasn't, because we were both rookies. And he says, he says, "Hey, Grady, phone." And I said, "Oh, it's okay." So I go and I grab the phone and I said, "I go Station 9, Grady," and it was the officer from the squad on the other line. And he says, he goes, "Hey," and I said, "Oh," I said, "Hey, Rob, what's up?" And you know, I knew him well because he's one of the guys that trained me, and he's a dear friend of mine till this day. And he says, "Hey, you want to go to the squad?" I said, "Yeah, I do." He goes, "Quit holding us." He goes, "We want to come play too." And I said, "Okay." I hung the phone up. So I said, "Well, I guess I won't be doing that anymore." So, but you know, it was a lot of it was a lot of fun. I didn't realize, like I said, I didn't realize that, you know, at the time in Engine 9 we were doing a lot of car fires, a lot of brush fires, and that was something that I wasn't. I would tell you I wasn't good at car fires and stuff like that because I got to get good at fighting car fires and stuff and understanding that stuff, and then the brush fires because we covered a large area just east and south of U.S. Steel and stuff, and then all along the railroad tracks and whatnot. But then so then after that, I was at Engine 9 till 2000. So I spent a year at Engine 9, and then one afternoon I was downtown picking up, you know, back when you got a check, you know, remember when we had those paper things? So,
yeah, those paper things. Yeah,
those little paper things, you know. So I went and I was going downtown to pick up my paycheck, and I pull up to downtown, and there was a guy from the squad standing outside, and he's a super nice guy, man. They called him the Ultimate Warrior, and his name's Lenzo Aaron. I mean, just great fireman. I mean, just unbelievable. I mean, I never seen that guy step down back off a fire and ever. And so he's standing outside, and I said, "Hey, man, what's up?" He's like, "Where you been?" I said, "I've been at home." "Why?" He goes, "Man, I've been waiting here all day for you." I'm like, "For what?" He says, "The fire chief wants to see you." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Why don't you just call me on my?" I actually, I had a, we had cell phones back then too, And I said, "Why don't you just call me on my cell phone?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I should have." I said, "What's up?" He goes, "Fire chief wants to see you." And he says, "If you say no," he goes, if you say no, I'm going to hurt you." And I said, "Okay." So knock on the door, and he's sitting at his desk looking at the computer, and again there's Rob Grady, the guy that I said hold the squad on, and here he's standing right there, and I'm like, well, that must be for holding them guys up. I walk in and I said, "Chief, you wanted to see me?" And he pulls his reading glasses down and he says, "Come here, I want you to take a look at something." And I walk up to his computer and I look up, and he says, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I knew there was transfers coming because they were opening a new firehouse. I knew there was transfers coming, but I didn't know, who. I was told I was going to go to Engine 2, and I said, so that I walk in his office and I look at his computer and I see Squad 2, and I see my name under it, and I see the assignment. I see Lieutenant Kerry Darnell. I see Engineer Tony Buckrop, Rescue Specialist Howard Giron, and then they had my name under there as Rescue Specialist. At the time, we were called Rescue Specialists if we worked on the rescue squad. And he says, "What do you think about this?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You want to go to the squad?" I said, "Yes, sir." So then he told me, you report to the squad your next work day. I said, "Okay." He goes, "But do me a favor." I said, "What's that?" He says, "The officer on Engine 2, call him and let him know you're not coming." So I said, "All right, I'll call him." Well, the guy that was the officer on Engine 2, his name was Joe Nevitt. Everybody called him Big Joe. And so Big Joe, he was one of the guys that I rode with all the time on the squad. He was actually the driver on the squad when I was riding. So I was riding with him, and he was at the time he was the officer at Engine 2. So I go and I call Joe. I call him up and I said, "Hey Joe, what's up?" And all of a sudden I hear click, he hangs up on me. And I'm like, well, I wonder what's up with that. So I call him back. And I call him back, and he answers. And he goes, well, I guess I'm not good enough to work for. And I said, no. I said, not at all. I said, but they asked me if I wanted to go to the squad. I said, I wanted to go to squad. And he started laughing. And he goes, no, it's all good. He goes, I'm happy. I'm happy for you. He says, you're not coming on my turn. He goes, but I'm happy you're going to the squad. So, moving forward, and my first day on the squad at the time, and I'll talk about a little history how things happen. When I went to the squad at the time, they were running a mini pumper as a rescue squad because that heavy rescue had been in an accident. So it was being the time the rig was being fixed, it was being refurbished. So my first day on the squad, there was only two of us on working that day on the squad, and it was myself and Tony Buckrop. And Tony, he was driving the squad, and so then I'm thinking, he goes, well, yeah, you're going to be the officer today. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you're going to be the officer. I'm like, okay. So he's like, we'll do it together. I'm like, okay. So he's driving. I'm the officer, and we get our first run. And I'll never forget. We pull out. We're in this mini pumper, and we take off for this fire. And Tony makes this turn. He makes this other turn, and I'm thinking, where are you going? And so we run the whole day, and then at the end of the shift, I tell him, I said, hey, Tony, I'll make a deal with you. He's like, what's that? I said, I'll drive, and you could be the officer. And he was like, he's like, really? I said, I'll drive, and then you could be the officer. And he was like, oh, okay. Well, the reason I told him that was because he didn't know where he was going. I did. So, yeah, he didn't know where he was going. So he had to say he did, but he didn't know where he was going. I did. And the reason I knew where to go was because from riding for so long and riding in the back of the rig, I always watched the way the drivers were driving and what routes they would take to go to fires. And so then that was our deal. And only every once in a while Tony would drive, and it wasn't too often. But moving forward, and I say that I said that the rig had gotten in an accident, and the rig had gotten in an accident, and then it was getting refurbished. Well, moving forward in my career, it was quite a few years later. The same thing had happened. The rig got in an accident, and the night that it got in an accident, I was driving. So we had met with Truck 4 at the same intersection, and we collided. So flipped the rig over. We slid for about another 100 feet. We slid, and then we hit a parked truck, and then the rig stopped. It was myself, the officer, and another firefighter that were on the rig, and then like I said, we met right at the intersection, and they clipped our back end, and we flipped, and then like I said, so the rig stopped, and everybody, the officer said, "Hey, is everybody okay?" And what was crazy was the officer that was on the rig. He had just came back from a broken arm, and it was his right arm, and that's the side we landed on. So he had said, "Hey, is everybody okay?" And I said, "No, I broke my arm. I broke my arm." And he's like, "What?" I said, "I broke my arm." So I'm sideways. I pull myself up. I'm standing on the seat of the rig, and I kick the windshield out. So I go and I kick the windshield out, and everybody came to us, and the guy driving the ladder truck come up, and he says, "Grady, are you okay?" And I could feel my shoulder wasn't in the socket, and I moved my arm, and my arm went back into the socket, and I passed out. So all I remember is I passed out, and I was laying in the street, and so I'm laying in the street, and I'll never forget the paramedic. She's looking up. I look up, and I see the paramedic, and she's talking to me, and she says, "Grady, are you okay?" And I'm looking and I'm like, I was thinking, man, what happened? Because I'd passed out, and she's like, hey, we got to check you out. We got to cut your clothes off. And I said, no, really, I'm good. Everything from my waist down is good. And she's like, what? I said, everything from my waist down is good. I had brand new uniform pants on. I didn't want to cut them up. So I go to the hospital. And I could feel my shoulder was numb. It was numb, and it felt weird. And then I had a gash on my head because my head hit the air conditioning unit. So I'd cut my head open, but I didn't need stitches. I just had a little cut in it. But so now the rig, here we go forward, and the rig was laying on its side, and I remember it was still running. The rig was actually still running, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, so they took me to the hospital. I go to the hospital. Doctors, they do X-ray, stuff like that. He says nothing. So the doctor says nothing's wrong, and I'm like, okay. Well, you see my shoulder, Eric. You can see there's a big bump on it. So yeah. I actually blew the AC joint out. I blew the AC joint out. So, but I was off for a couple of months, and then I came back to work, and then came back to work, and then I was went back to work, and everything was good. And then so then, like I said, we kept doing our thing, So it was like my wife says this all the time. It was 2 years, 2 weeks, 3 days, 24 hours, and 10 minutes. We were at a storefront fire, and we're at this fire, and we had a fire earlier in the night, and we catch this fire earlier in the morning. It's probably like, I want to say it was about 2:30 in the morning. We catch this fire, and we pull up, and there's heavy fire conditions on the first floor. It's a storefront with apartments above, and the engine, engine 4 is there, engine 2, truck 4, we're there. So the engine's making a good hit. So they forced the door to the apartments above, and we get in the stairwell, and I see a bunch of guys at the top of the stairs. I just see the top of their boots. That's all I see. So it's that nice thick brown smoke. I'm like, oh. So I said, hey, you guys need a line. And they're like, no, we don't see any fire. So I said, hey, Cap, you got your tick camera? And he's like, oh. So he goes, he gets out of the stairs and goes and grabs the camera. While he was going to get his camera, I stepped up 2 more steps, and I said, hey, guys, you guys need a boom. And it blew us right out of the stairwell. So we got blown right out of the stairwell. And so now, I make a joke of it because, I tell people we should be dead. But it blew us out of the stairwell, and I'll never forget. And I say this: there was a table across the street with 3 guys, and one guy had on his card 8.9, 9.9, and a 10. And, the way I landed in the street, and so then there was 3 other guys up there that came out, and I knew I was burned because my hood was soaking wet from the fire before. So I knew I was burned because I could feel my ears and shit they were burned up pretty good. And then another firefighter had tumbled down the stairs and broke his arm, and then a captain had come out, and he was sitting on the bumper of the rig, and I stand up and I'm like, man, I know I'm burned. I could just tell, and I walk over and I look at this other guy. This captain, and again, he's another dear friend. His name is Tim Haynes. He says, I said, Tim, stop. And he's like, what? I said, stop. He was trying to put his skin back up on his hand. It burned his hand that bad when we got blown out. And then the top of his head, it burned the top of his head. So we go to the hospital. I looked like Princess Leia. I had my ears all wrapped up and everything. And, he's sitting in his room, and I walk over to his room, and he's got his hand all wrapped up and everything, and he says, and he goes, hey, what's up, my man? And I said, man, Tim, you don't look good. He's like, no. I said, man, we should be dead. And I cracked it. I cracked the joke, and we were laughing and everything. And they flew him out. They flew him out to Chicago, and then I got released. I got released, and I had to go to our comp care where they they had to take a look at my ears and stuff. So I'm like, okay. So I go there, and my ears were burning pretty good. And so then the doctor at our comp care I grew up with, and he says to me, he says, Grady, what did you do? He goes, you're not supposed to stick your head in the oven. I said, you got jokes. So he goes, hey, we're going to have to clean that dead skin off here. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, we're going to have to peel all that off. They did that. And then the fire chief at the time, she wanted to know what happened and everything. And then we told her what happened. And so then I was off for like 3 weeks for that. And so then I, healed and everything like that. So then I get a phone call from the chief of training. And at the time, the chief of training, he says, his name was Paul Bradley. He says, hey, you want to come to training? And I said, no. He's like, what? I said, no, I don't want to come to training. He's like, why? I said, I don't want to work straight days. He says, well, no. He goes, I want you to come to training as a safety officer. And I said, I'm thinking, really? Right after all this? I'm like, okay. So he says, you'll work a 24-hour shift. He says, you'll go to all fires, all car accidents. I said, okay. So I took the position as a safety officer. So it was considered a captain's position. So I took it, and I did the safety officer job for a couple of years. And then moving fast forward, they decided they wanted to make the safety officer a battalion chief's position, which, okay, I was good with that. And so then I was asked by the chief of training at the time, because the chief of training at the time became the fire chief. So Chief Bradley became the fire chief, and then Chief Walker, who was the chief of training when I came on the fire department, went back into the training chief's position. So he asked me if I would be his drill master, which ran the fire academies and for the recruit classes and stuff. And I said, well, for you, I'll do it. I'll do it for you, And so the fire chief had told him, hey, we need a drill master. And he says, but don't ask Grady, because he said he won't do it. So then Walker said, well, it's kind of interesting because he said he would. And he's like, what? He goes, yeah, he would. So again, fire chief calls me, and he says, well, he goes, so I said, Chief, let me tell you something. I can't work for everybody, but I can work for you. And I said, I could work for you, and I could work for Walker. And he said, okay. So I went to so I go to training now. So I go to training, and I'm there for a day. I get there, and the chief of training at the time says, well, you know why you're here? And I said, well, yeah. And because we got a recruit class coming. He says, yeah. He goes, but any other reason why you think you're here? And I said, yeah, I think I'm here to take your job. And he says, yeah, because I knew he was retiring. So I knew he was going to retire. And then so then I said, I think I'm here to take your job. And he's like, well, let me show you some stuff. So he's showing me, how to go about, signing up classes, putting classes in, all that, all the administrative stuff. So he taught me how to do that. We were doing that for a day. And then the next day I come to work, and I'm like, where's Walker? And I didn't see him. I said, where's Chief Walker at? So I call him. I said, hey, Chief, you coming to work today? He's like, oh, no, I forgot to tell you. They put me on vacation. What? Yeah, they put me on vacation for a year. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I call the fire chief, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, hey, by the way, we got a rookie class starting in 2 weeks. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, we got a rookie class starting in 2 weeks. And I'm like, well, what about Chief Walker? He's like, well, you already know how to, you already know, you've been training for a long time. And I'm like, yeah, I was doing training, but I didn't know how to run a fire academy. I had no idea how to run a fire academy, not in the least. So So then I was actually technically turned around and I was the chief of training and the drill master at the same time. So I was like, oh my! So I had to learn how to do all gear purchasing, equipment purchasing, all that kind of stuff. So I was just glad that one day that Chief Walker was there. He showed me how to do that stuff. But so then I was the I was the drill, like I said, I was the drill master for 2 years, and then I was asked to be under a new administration. I was asked to be because the administration had changed and the fire chief had changed, and we got a new fire chief, and his Chief O'Donnell asked me. I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, I resign." And he's like, "What?" I said, "I resign." And he's like, "Well, why are you resigning?" I said, he goes, "I was going to ask you to be the chief of training." I said, "Well, that's what I'm resigning from the drill master spot to be the chief of training." And he's like, "Oh." So at that time I became the chief of training, and then right in that time was when COVID started. So then we had COVID had started and stuff, and then we're running a fire academy during COVID. And obviously, as you know, because you were the chief of training at Indianapolis, that it was challenging at that time. It was a real challenging because of everybody getting sick. We're cleaning things 3 or 4 times a day. We're trying to keep distance from each other, all that kind of stuff. So it was a challenge. It was.
That was your first recruit class. Was that particular?
That was my second. My second. Yeah. No, actually, no. I take that back. I'm sorry, Eric. That was my third. One. So that was my third academy. A third academy during COVID. So I would say to anybody, that it was very challenging. It was because some guys were, we were telling them, hey, if you don't feel well, if you're not feeling good, don't, go get checked, or, don't come to work, or, but at that time during COVID, this was really, to me, this whole part of this academy was, to me, it was one I'll never forget, because when we were doing the academy, the person that was actually the chief of training, actually the operations chief for the fire department, his name was Greg Mellion. And Greg was the chief of training for, I want to say, half of my academy class before he became the chief operations. And so Chief Mellion, somebody had walked in my office. I didn't know who it was. And I rolled my chair and I look, and I see this guy walking, and he had a mask on his face. And I said, "Hey, Greg, what's going on?" And he says, "Well, how do you know it was me?" And I said, "Well, no one forgets how somebody walks. People always, tell me I limp, I got the Grady shuffle, whatever. I just laugh. It is what it is. I just laugh. So this guy who was the chief of training or operations, Greg Mellion, had come in, and he's like, sits down, and we're talking, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "Nothing." I go, "How are you?" He's like, "Well," he's like, "I'm all right." He goes, my cancer came back, and the cancer is in my lymph nodes, and they took out all my lymph nodes and all that." And I'm like, "What?" So he asked me, he says, "Hey, you don't mind if I hang around and stop in and see you guys during this academy, do you?" I said, "No, not at all. You're always welcome." I tell all the retired guys, you're always welcome. Come by anytime. So Greg was battling cancer, and he was hanging around, talking with the recruits, and he had asked me. He says, "Hey, if you got any questions, just ask me. Anything you want to ask me." And I'm like, "Okay." So he'd come out every day, and he would hang out with us and stuff, and he would talk and and all that, but I didn't even realize at the end of this fire academy that he was going to be gone. And it was really, to me, it was an honor to be able for him to hang out with us during that time, because he had asked me, he goes, well, what's your position now? I said, I'm the chief of training. And I said, I'll be honest with you, I never thought ever in my life that I would be the chief of training. It never even crossed my mind. And he looked at me and he said, we did. And I said, what? He goes, we did. He goes, we all did. He goes, because you wanted to learn and we wanted to teach you. So I always tell guys, and I show them in the academy, there's a picture at the academy, and it has on there all the original guys from the squad. When they started the squad concept in Gary, it's a picture of all those guys. And out of everybody on that picture, there's only 2 guys I never fought fire with. But all the rest of them that were on that in that picture, I fought fire with. One was the chief of training. One was the chief of training at the time, Chief Bradshaw. I know Chief Bradshaw well. Very, very nice guy, very knowledgeable guy. Loves the fire service. Still always talks about it every time I see him. He talks about the fire service. And another one is he was the engineer on the squad. His name is Butch Payne. I knew him, but I never fought fire with him. So those were the only 2 guys that were in that picture that I have hanging in the classroom that I'd never fought fire with. And I tell everybody, I said, these are the guys that taught me. These are the guys that taught me what I know, and many more too. But these were a lot of guys that that I looked up to, and I still look up to. But like I said, I never crossed my mind that I was going to be the chief of training. Never. And I say this all the time, and it's a fact. I tell every class this, and any class that I've had, they'll tell you there was only 2 reasons I went to school. Number 1, my mom and dad said I had to, and number 2, there was girls there, so why not? So other than that, I hated school. I tell people all the time I had a learning disability, and they're like, no way. I'm like, absolutely. I do. I will never tell anybody, when you think you're smart, you're not. You're not. There's always something else to learn. Always something that you can learn and better yourself and better others. So I know one of the, so then moving forward, I've been at the training division now. I've been the chief of training for 6 years. So 6 years of my career, I've been the chief of training. So, and I tell people this: it is a position that you are there to take care of the guys. Your job is to take care of the guys, make sure that they have everything they need to do their job. And I say this: they're firemen. We already know what we do. We either lose it, steal it, or break it. That's it. And the big thing for me is making sure that the guys have what they need. And I've been very fortunate with every administration that I've worked under was able to make it happen. When I asked for something, I got it. So I can't complain. Can't complain about that at all. But we were talking the other day. I know we were talking the other day, and you had asked me about what do you think when you came on the fire service you wish you knew more of than you do now? I remember you saying that. And one of the things that I'll say, one of the things that I'll say is I wish we had the technology we have today. Number one, okay, because that obviously does make things easier. But the other thing was you don't realize at the time, that a lot of the guys that you work with were going to die from cancer. And being more educated on the cancer aspect of the fire service, because you don't think about you don't think about those things early in your career. You don't. You want to go to fires. 2, you want to help people. However it is, but whatever it may be you want to do, but you don't think about the end result of what this job does to you. The other thing is, I didn't think that at 50 I was getting a total hip replacement. that, this job takes a toll on your body. It beats it. It beats it to death. And, and I know we talked about it where I just, I had to give in. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to have it done, but I had to do it. And you don't realize how much, it beats you up. But, obviously you got to make sure you try to take care of yourself. It's not if you get hurt, it's when you get hurt, because you're going to get hurt. And then, going back to that cancer thing, you go back to cancer and you talk about cancer. And then I look at it and I say to myself, I've watched my wife go through having cancer 5 times. So, and then now, last week, my wife was telling me that her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. So, so it's, both my parents died of cancer. My father died of liver cancer. My mother died of lung cancer. The other thing, we talk about is, wearing that SCBA, wearing the air pack. We're all guilty of it. Anybody says that they're not, they're lying. We're men. We try to be, we want to, how tough we are. But you're already a tough guy because you're already doing something most people don't want to do, But then, we talked about, the other thing we talked about was, training new recruits today. All right. What's the difference about training new recruits today? Well, there's a couple things, and if you think about it, one of those things is today kids are computer savvy. They're really good with looking stuff up. It's at a touch of their fingers. Just like, when you go through, you're teaching or you're asking a question, they already have the answer. When they ask you the question, they already have the answer. They want to see if you know the answer. Just like when we came into fire service, everything we did in hazmat was you looked it up in a book. You had to look it up in a book. Now you can look it up on a computer. You can look it up on your phone. When you take those things away, when you take those things away from today's student, they got to read. They got to read it now. They absolutely got to read it, and they got to study. I always tell the new recruits, anybody in this room, is anybody working the trades? Is anybody, pipe fitter, anybody work in the union? And a couple of them will raise their hand. I said, when you came in to be an electrician, what are you? An apprentice. Absolutely. When you come on the fire service, you're an apprentice. You become a journeyman after about 10 years. I say about 10 years, you become a journeyman. Once you learn your trade and you're good at it, you can teach others. And then I don't know. I'll never say you perfect it because you don't, because it changes. Right now we're sitting here talking right now, and the fire service is changing right now. I think the other thing with training new recruits today is one of the things that we were lucky as kids is my father would take me in the garage and show me how to do stuff. Show me how a chainsaw works. Show me how, lawnmower or change the brakes on a car or anything like that. And I mean, I'm not trying to say this being mean, but they're not taught that today. We got to teach them that, and if we don't teach them, we have to understand that, okay, we have 20 students, okay, and 18 of those students have never started a chainsaw. So what do we do? What do we got to do? We got to teach them how that chainsaw works. We got to teach them how to operate it. We have to practice with it, because one, we don't want them to get hurt, and two, we don't want to get hurt. So it's definitely changed dramatically, since when I came on the job, where most of the guys in class, they did know how to do all those things. I mean, cut grass, wax the chief's car. Wax the chief's car. Wax the fire truck. Hey, you laugh, but guys, they can't do it because
I know, but I can remember having to do that when I was in the academy, so do stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that, Eric, because they would bring the red cars and stuff down to the fire academy, and we'd have to wash and wax them. And that's something. And I'll be honest with you, I'm guilty of that. We need to do. We need to do that. We need to bring that back, because again, everybody talks about pride and ownership and everything. And one of the things that I can say is, and everybody always says this, man, your guys' rigs are beautiful. They're beautiful. And the guys, they do. They take pride, and the administration does. They'll do like competitions on who has the cleanest rig, and they give them gift certificates and stuff like that. And and a lot of times, it's kind of hard it's hard to decide who wins, because these guys are even the tops of the rigs these guys are cleaning. So yeah, I mean I just think that in today's fire service. And I tell a lot of these instructors, hey, man, stop. What? Stop. What do you mean? Stop. You sat in the same seat that kid did. You sat in the same spot that young man or young lady is sitting in. You sat there too. And none of us were rock stars. None of us, But the one thing that has changed dramatically too is, even if, I always tell people, where do you want to be a firefighter at? And they'll hear, oh man, I heard Gary's hiring. Okay. Do you really want to be a career firefighter? And I'm like, and I'll say, hey, you got to go where you fit. You have to go where you think you're going to fit at. And I wanted to go to Gary, period. I did test for one other department, and it was the department I did test for was Wilkinsburg, and it was right outside the city of Pittsburgh. And if I'm not mistaken, the city of Pittsburgh took over Wilkinsburg, so it is the city of Pittsburgh now. But I only tested there, and then Gary. And I knew I wanted to be in Gary. And like I said, 26 and a half years later, I'm still here. And I have no plans. I don't have no plans on going anywhere unless, obviously I run out of age or my body tells me enough's enough, and that's it. But today, the new kids, what's crazy is they can get on Gary, leave or be let go, and be on another fire department within a month or so, because everybody's hiring now. Because a lot of people are retiring. And so they can go, and guys that jump departments. I know a lot of guys that have been on 4 or 5 different fire departments within 10 years, and I'm like, man, is it you or is it the department?
Yeah.
Because the grass ain't always greener on the other side.
Right.
Everybody's the same. It's either bigger or smaller. Nothing. The fire service doesn't change a whole lot. As far as that goes. And my biggest thing is you make the best of it. You make the best of it. You get out of the fire service what the fire. You'll get out of the fire service what you put in the fire service. The other thing is, you always hear this. Fire service owes you nothing. That's true. It doesn't. It doesn't owe you anything. You signed up for this. This wasn't something that they came knocking on the door and said, "Hey, you want a job?" No, you went to them. Went to the department. And I'll say this: I don't beg anybody to stay on the department. If they leave, I always say, good luck wherever you go. Make sure you turn all your gear in and have a nice, take care. Stay in touch. But yeah, I mean, it has its challenges for sure. And obviously today, as far as the fire service goes, because again, I think we've been lucky. One of the things we talked about is I do training at the MAC facility in Valparaiso, Indiana, and yeah, it's quite the facility. Absolutely. I mean, you've been out there, you've seen what it's all about. We've been lucky. I would say the last 5 classes we've had over 56 students in the class. So obviously we're either doing something right, or departments are that desperate or are hurting that bad for people, but I also tell the instructors, hey man, you don't have to, people will weed themselves out. They'll figure out this isn't for them, and you don't have to, they will do it on their own. And, you get guys where, oh man, they've, of course, and I say this, they say, oh man, I don't know what's up with that. I don't know what's up with him or her. I don't get it. I don't get it. And I'm like, what about you? Do you remember when you did the same thing? They'll figure it out if they want to do it or not, because, the classes that are being held, they're free. They don't cost anything. But the one thing I tell the students is, did you read that fine print you can't see in the paper? What? What are you talking about? I said, yeah. You got to get a real thick magnifying glass and look at that piece of paper, because you don't see it, but I'm going to tell you what it says. It might be free, but you have to do the work. You have to put the work in to get it, because it ain't free. It ain't free. It's not free at all. You got to put in the time. You have to put the time in, and you have to tell your family, this is what I'm going to be doing for the next 6 months. You're going to miss out on stuff. We've all missed out on stuff with our families, and because we were there, because we were working. But, unfortunately, we'll start with 56. We'll normally end up with somewhere in the 40s when we graduate. But it is nice to see when they do graduate from the academy that some of them end up going into, they make it a career. They do. They take to heart what we tell them, So, but, I just think, like I said, it has its challenges. Every class has a challenge, for sure. What works for one class don't work for the next. You have to, and I tell guys today, the kid, everybody talks about the generation. Oh man, it's the generation. We've all said it. Every one of us have said, oh man, it's the generation. Is it? I mean, maybe it is, but we have to adapt to the generation. We have to find new ways to get these kids to buy in. That's what it is, because some of them think they wanted to be firefighters, and some of them are doing it because their friend did it. So, but other than that, I mean, like I said, it's just some departments are revolving doors, and it's a shame. But I've had students that went through 6 months of the fire academy, and then the day after they graduated from the academy, they quit. And I just that blows my mind. Spend 6 months of your life, 6 months of your life in the fire academy, and then the next day you quit. So, and maybe they just figured out it wasn't for them. They just don't have the time.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the generations. I always told people that, I used to say that there was probably somebody back in 1939 that was complaining about the guys that went off and what the people we now call the greatest generation. Somebody was probably complaining about them when they were coming on the fire department and saying, "Oh, this generation, right? It's cyclical." Somebody said it about us when we came on. They said, these Generation X kids don't get it, and now it's the millennials and whatever it is, Gen Z, and all the other different alphabet soup names they give for them. But it's the same thing. But certainly technology and the way that the reliance on technology obviously is, it's just you can't keep up with it because things evolve so fast now. Not only in the fire service, but just in the world in general. And we started during a slower technological time, right? We didn't have a lot of the stuff. So yeah, I was still reading books and taking writing your own notes out, and no thermal imaging cameras, and MSAs with elephant trunk hoses and all that. So
I came on the job. It was funny because when I came on the fire department, they still had the chest-mounted regulator Scots, and I have to do this. This is what I have to do. All right, who in here has seen the movie Backdraft? And they raised their hand, and I said, that air pack they were wearing, that's what I came on the job wearing, a steel tank and a chest-mounted regulator. And then I was lucky that, we always had bunker gear in the city, but we also could wear hip boots and long coats, and we wore hip boots and long coats. And, a lot of guys will say, oh man, I don't know about that as a firefighter and everything. And I laugh and chuckle and everything. And just like, okay, But yeah, you are. I mean, just like, so we talk about, I always talk about rope rescue and stuff like that, and how I'm when they talk about systems, this is just me. I know there's all these, these fancy gadgets, the clutch, the MPDs, all this stuff. And I said, what do you do when somebody loses that, or do you know how to build a system? Do you know how to build a system from scratch? Because we should be teaching guys that how to build it from scratch in case something does happen. Where things get, like, again, I talked about it earlier. Things get misplaced, right? They do, and we're only teaching them one way. That's the only way they know.
Right.
And I always tell guys, hey man, it's just and I'll say this from the great words of Big Joe Nevitt. He used to say this: "Hey Bubba, just take this and put it in your toolbox, and you might need it later on. I don't know when, but you might need it later on." And he was telling you to put it in your brain, okay, which is your toolbox, and you'll have it for later.
Right.
I remember when I was learning rope rescue. When I was learning rope rescue, I was learning from Captain Rob Grady. Actually, he was a division chief when he retired, and division chief Kerry Darnell. And these guys were teaching rope rescue from the simple system, from a 1-to-1 to a 27-to-1. Even if you've never used a 27-to-1, you knew how to make it. And it's stuck in your head. A 4-to-1 back. You close your eyes, and I can tell you everything you need to build that. And they taught us that stuff. And then obviously technology changed, and things got easier. But what happens when we lose that easy way to do it?
Right. Nothing
just
wrong
like
with
a tick camera. Yeah.
A
tick camera, great. Yeah. Yeah. The tick camera, great device to have. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. But what happens when the battery is dead because someone decided not to charge it? Well, now what? Now you got to go back to your senses, So,
yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Wow. That was it. Hey, I do have a question for you. So, what is, and you may not know the answer, but what is this? Why are Gary's fire apparatus the blue and red like they are? Do you know the origins of that?
Yeah, I do. So originally the rigs were red. Okay. Then they went to a darker blue. Okay. They were a darker blue, and a lot of people, and Chief Bradshaw was the one that cleared it up a couple times. And Chief Bradshaw was talking about, a lot of guys thought we had bought E1s, and we had I want to say it was 5 E1s, and they were a darker blue, and everybody says, oh, they almost look black. So they said that they were rejects from Chicago, and they weren't. They were not. They were just darker blue tops. And in 1989, the fire, and that time the fire chief was Ben Perry, and I knew Chief Perry, very nice guy, very he was one of those. He was a chief of training also, and but he was the fire chief. And at the time, the city was buying new apparatus, and one of the apparatus they were buying were Seagraves and Pierces, and they'd come up with a color called Perry Blue, and that's actually a color. It's Perry Blue. So they call it a purple. Pierce calls it a purple, and it's weird because when we were at Pierce, picking up our tower ladder, the guy gave us a tour, and he says, "You want to see how old that color is?" That you guys use? And I'm like, yeah. So he goes to a filing cabinet and goes to Gary Fire Department, pulls it straight out, and here's the color. And I was like, wow. But it came about in 89. It was 89-ish. It was actually 89 because the 89 Seagraves came in. They were that color. I actually have a picture of those rigs when they were delivered. They actually had plywood in the front of the rig to protect it, to protect the paint and everything on the rig. And then the Pierces came in the same exact color with that prairie blue and red. I like it. I actually, my first engine company.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see that, picture there.
Yeah.
Yep, that was a 1990 Pierce. So and there's that color, and that color still is the same color that's on our apparatus.
Yeah.
I like it. I think it's different. It's a lot of people that look at it at first are just kind of give you a weird look, and then they're like, I like that color. It looks cool. It does. I like it, and it's traditional. It's tradition, and it's known. It's known. It's known that it's a Gary rig. That's a Gary rig. Anywhere you go, Northwest Indiana, everybody knows that's a Gary rig.
Yeah. Yeah, it is unique. You can always, they stand out. That color scheme stands out. You go to FDIC or something and you see one on the floor, and you don't even have to go over and look at the name on the door. You can, it's a Gary apparatus. Yeah. So I would always wonder. Yeah. Well, thanks. I'd always wondered the backstory with, where it came from and how long you guys had been painting your apparatus that way. So.
Yeah, it came about from Chief Perry's administration.
Yeah. Well, excellent.
Yeah, he was, like I said, he was the first fire chief I met. He was actually the one that signed my paperwork to ride. So, real nice guy. You think of a fire chief. He's one that was, he's one that hits my mind. Him and there's some of our other chiefs, but he definitely. When I met him, I was just like, he's like, "How you doing, young man?" And I was like, "I'm good, sir." He goes, "You going to ride this piece of apparatus right here?" Then he gave me the history of the squad, and I didn't actually know the whole history of it. And then he had told me about it, and then the guys on the squad told me about it. So
yeah, very cool. Well, I appreciate you telling us your story, Rob. It was I learned a lot. I know you, and we spend time together. Usually it seems like once a month somewhere together for 3 or 4 days, teaching a class. So, yeah, and I still learned a lot. So, I appreciate you taking time out of your day this morning to hang out with me on the podcast and tell us about your career and how you ended up where you are and some of your philosophies and attitudes about training firefighters. So it was really good. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you. Eric. I always said, I always said that I wasn't going to do a podcast, but then, after, first time I met you, guys were like, "Hey man, you know Eric Dreiman?" I'm like, "No," I said, "I know he signs a lot of my paperwork, but he goes, well, he's going to come and he's going to do live fire with us." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then, and then Lauren, which was funny. Lauren's like, "Yeah, Eric's a good guy. Sometimes I don't know how to take him." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So then I meet you, and I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, I had you cracking up. I said, you were laughing, and I know your belly was hurting, but I like to have a good time. I do. I like to have a good time. I like to have a good time when I'm training. I like to, I pick on myself first. I always do. I pick on myself first, and but at the end of the day, you just never know who you're gonna cross paths with. You really don't.
Yeah.
And I know the one story that I told Lauren, and I think I told you this story. The reason why I drink Jack Daniels, it was because we were training one day and we were training on a building and we didn't know that the building was occupied, and the guy got a little upset with us, and it was so then after that, it was ever since that. I always say that's why I drink Jack Daniels. Almost lost my life that day and didn't even realize we were getting ready to lose our lives. We didn't know the building was occupied. Had no idea.
Yeah.
But so yeah, and it's. I always say life's too short, man. You can't be you can't be mad for you can't be mad that something's changed. We hate the way it is and we hate change, but sometimes we don't have a choice. And it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just try to make it better. Just try to make it better every day. So, but yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, I always said I wasn't going to do a podcast, and but when you asked and I said, you know what, I believe I like what you're doing. I said I'll do it for you. I'll do it.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad it worked out. Well, Thank you. On behalf of Dave Rhodes and Diane Rothschild, thanks everybody for tuning in to the Hooks and Hoses podcast. The early registration for FDIC 2026 is open. So I got notification that we'll be headed back to teach Vent Inter Search again in April of 26. So it'll be year 17, I believe, for our class. So I'm looking forward to that. Hot classes will fill up. They will sell out. So I encourage everybody to get registered as soon as you can. Otherwise, you may miss out on an opportunity to get some great instruction from some great instructors that'll be teaching there in 2026. So thanks, everybody. Have a good month, and we'll see you sometime in November. Take care.
Prepare, respond, survive. When seconds count, train with the best. Fire facilities, custom steel towers built for real-world fire training. Be ready, be resilient.